Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to Hail Yes, a Detroit Free Press podcast about University of Michigan athletics. I'm Tony Garcia, Michigan football and basketball writer for The Free, joined, I would say, as always, by the fellas, but we are down one fella. Andrew Burkle, our producer and editor, not with us today. Don't worry, he is well. He's in good spirits. I think he's somewhere in Florida. He is an extravagant fella, that guy. So, I mean, he might be in the Keys. He might be, I don't know, he might be in a PJ somewhere. I don't try to keep track of Andrew Burkle. It's hard enough to keep track of the other half of our tag team, Reiner Saban, our Big Ten insider. Although I believe we will be riding down to Columbus together Saturday, so that will help me keep an eye on you. How are you, Reiner?
I'm doing okay. Made a nice trek to East Lansing and back. It was wonderful, man.
Yeah. No, it's really riveting that 23 to 96, 14 to 23 to 96 from Ann Arbor to East Lansing never gets old. But we'll talk about them a bit later in the picks as well. They are looking to do what Michigan did last week, and that is clinch a bowl berth in this final game. But this week for us, Reiner, it is all about Michigan. It is all about Ohio State. It is the game. Number 2, Ohio State hosting 6-5 Michigan, unbeaten, playing for less than in recent years. Although I will give them credit, it doesn't feel like that much. I mean, because we know it's so much less it is, but there is plenty of animus for Ohio State, right? I mean, it is always hate week. It is always that week this time of year. The last 3 years they've played for a spot in the Big Ten championship, to represent the East, and frankly, a spot in the college football playoff. Ohio State already has that locked up, essentially, unless it loses twice in a row. And then I would say Michigan can't do anything to get there. But a big game, nonetheless, Reiner.
Yeah. There's no way that Michigan can make the college football playoff. That was back in October that was determined. In fact, that was when Colston Loveland said that their goal now is to spoil other people's seasons. So that would apply to this game, too. And I think, again, Michigan's probably going to go in with that mentality and also the psychological edge of having won the last 3. This is one of those games where, Ohio State could come in very tense, Ryan Day too, especially if they don't get off to an early start, and it seeds some belief for Michigan. So it could get interesting if that ends up happening. If Ohio State takes the ball and scores immediately, then they're probably in good position to kind of run away with it in that case. But yeah, it's going to be probably more competitive than the line would indicate, and that the seasons up until this point would indicate for both schools.
I always love that about big games, just that every possession, every quarter, everything is heightened, right? Normally there's that time, that element of settling into a game, right? You're kind of trading body blows. You're seeing the new style that this team will play with this year, their approach this year. Doesn't feel like there's a lot of time for that, to your point, for Michigan. They've had a lot of success when they've gotten out and ahead, right? 14-0 against USC, 24-3 against Minnesota. Those are the 2 best wins this year. Got out early, held on. And they have better quarterback play now with Davis Warren more settled in than they did then with Alex Orji, actually, who won both of those games. So it's clear if Michigan wants to stay in it and have a good chance, they got to start quickly. But this is the Michigan-Ohio State preview, and we can't do that without talking. I mean, if you've listened to this, if you follow Michigan, we don't need to introduce you to who Mason Graham is and to who Davis Warren is. We'll get to some of the things that all these people need to do later. But we want to look at Ohio State, just introduce you with them, familiarize everybody with the Buckeyes a little bit, because this Ohio State might be the best of the last 3-4 Ohio States. I don't know if you'd go that far, Reiner, but it is even Steven. In the way Michigan said they wanted to stay at that bar, Ohio State really has. Number 1 in scoring defense, number 10 on offense, and just a host of new characters on the attack. Quarterback Will Howard completing 74% of his passes, 33 touchdowns, 6 picks, and then former SEC Offensive Player of the Year, and that is a title that jumps out. Quinshon Judkins from Ole Miss. He's part of a 2-headed duo with Travion Henderson in the backfield. They got more than 1,500 yards, some odd, together. And then I think my favorite part is their wide receiver corps. Reiner, it is Jeremiah Smith, the freshman. It is Emeka Buka, the senior. and it is Carnell Tate, the Chicagoland product, each of which have stat lines that rival Michigan's entire wide receiver room combined. So hopefully I know I said a lot of names, but you can dive deeper on what they do and why. That's a lot of good pieces on one unit.
Yeah, I mean, they've always had really good offensive pieces. Yeah, I saw them play Michigan State early this year, and, Jeremiah Smith made a couple of amazing plays in that game, including a one-hand touchdown grab. I mean, he's kind of opened up things for the other guys, too. I mean, with Carnell Tate and Buka, who I was just standbys for years and have just been constantly producing for them. And so, I mean, the thing is that they invested $20 million into this roster for player retention and also to get those transfers that you mentioned, including Caleb Downs on the defensive side. So, I mean, everything has been geared towards getting vengeance on Michigan, getting revenge, and also trying to win a national championships here. And they've got the roster across the board that suggests that, although I don't think that the offense overall is as explosive as it has been in years past. I don't know why that is. Maybe it has something to do with the offensive line not being as strong. But I mean, again, that was an issue even in the last couple of years. Again, Michigan's had that physicality advantage that's kind of narrowed the gap in the talent because Ohio State had and continues to out-recruit them on an annual basis. And Michigan has found something in the physicality and toughness aspect of it to neutralize the immense talent advantage they have. And this offense, again, isn't as explosive for whatever reason as the previous ones, especially the ones led by C.J. Stroud and Justin Fields before that.
I'd say part of the reason, correct me if you don't agree with this, I mean, they lost left tackle Josh Simmons at Oregon, right, earlier this year. And then a couple weeks ago, in practice, they lost their center, Seth McLaughlin. Now, they've only played one game without him, and they were okay, scoring 37-38 something against Indiana. But, I mean, if you lose your left tackle and your center, that's gonna kind of spell the beginning of the end for a ton of teams. Yet, they're still top 10 in scoring, right? They're still, or an offense, I mean, they're still very elite, and they can move the ball. And Sharon Moore said that on Monday, right? He's like, look, they're going to move the ball. I mean, there's nobody in America. Georgia would not stop this team from moving the ball, right?
But those top Ohio State teams, though, in years past, they were averaging 45, 46. And even in the Indiana game, I mean, one of those touchdowns came on Caleb Downs' punt return. So, I mean, like, it's not the same, level of offense that we've seen. I mean, those offenses were absurd.
Will Howard is not as prolific a passer, it seems, as a C.J. Stroud, or I mean, even or as dynamic as Justin Fields was before him, right? It's a different style of dual threat. But yeah, I mean, also they've played Oregon, they've played Penn State, they've played Indiana, right? Those are three of the better defenses in America, certainly in the Big Ten, and now they're going to have to play Michigan. So it's just. You can't. I mean, and they're still putting up 36 something or around there. I haven't looked at their exact output, but they're doing okay on offense. And one of the things I wanted to point out, I guess I won't save it for later. When we are down, when that ball is kicked, in Ohio Stadium in the Horseshoe on Saturday, we are recording this 3:30 on Tuesday. We want to get this out Wednesday before Thanksgiving. We hope you all have a wonderful Thanksgiving. But when that ball is kicked off, Reiner, it will be 5 years to the day since Ohio State last beat Michigan, right? I mean, and just think about that environment, right? That stadium, that energy. And so offense is one thing throughout the season. It's a whole other thing when it feels like you're running with the wind at your back, right? And you got some juice. And now Michigan can take the wind out of their sails early. I can't believe this. I've been to Columbus twice, Reiner. Ohio State is 0-2 in those two games that I've been to. So I have seen, Michigan State in 2015 and then Michigan in 2022. So I have watched teams go into that stadium in the Horseshoe and snatch souls, right? And it can happen, but it's got to happen early. You hit the nail on the head. It's got to happen in that first half. Like, if you remember, obviously you do, 2 years ago, Ohio State was up 10-0, right? It looked like they could put the nail in the coffin. Cornelius Johnson catches that like slant and go. I mean, for 70 some yards, then he catches the deep post. All of a sudden, Michigan's up, right? And then And then it gets real quiet, and then they start trading blows, and Michigan pulls away in the fourth. So, I guess, what do you think about that?
Well, yeah, I mean, they have to get up. I think Michigan has to get up early. I mean, the 2022 team was obviously much different than this team as far as the offensive capabilities. I mean, that play that you alluded to wasn't a slant and go. I mean, it was just a little curl route. It was up the sideline. And, again, Jim Knowles did a zero blitz on third down. And, it was probably an okay call given what J.J. McCarthy had done up until that point in that sense. Although it proved disastrous because, again, left, the cornerback on the island, and all Cornelius Johnson had to do was make one move. And
yeah, the goal was after.
Yeah, it was gone. Yeah, that was the post, the deep post in the middle of the field that, again, also took the top off. And then in that game, they also did the Colston Loveland pass, and it was, I think, a trick play. Yeah.
That was his coming out play.
Yeah, right. The little slipping, and going, for the touchdown or whatever, that 40-yard catch, I think, and run. And so, again, there were a number of big plays in that moment. And, Ohio State the next year wasn't as susceptible to some of the big plays. That was a more grinded out game. Again, in Ron Moore's press conference Monday, they kind of alluded to it. They had to be more aggressive in the play calling. They converted 3 4th downs in that game last year. And so Ohio State's defense was pretty solid in that game. It was just again, credit to Michigan and having that kind of durable offense. They don't have that this year, and they don't have the explosive element. So they're going to have to really manufacture something, and I don't know if they can against this defense. I mean, this defense is still pretty loaded. Again, they invested a lot of money into player retention, and a lot of these guys came back, like Jack Sawyer. They've got Denzel Burke. I mean, you have Indabosin on the other side, who's a little handsy as a cornerback, and maybe that's where they can try to go after. But then you have Caleb Downs at safety now, who's was last year probably pound for pound the best freshman in the country, and also arguably one of the best defenders in the country already as a freshman.
And what's amazing is all those names, you didn't mention JT Tuiomoluau or their two leading tacklers, Sonny Styles or Cody Simon.
Yeah, Cody Simon is a really impactful player.
Who is a beast. Right? I mean, and they both have 4 or 5 sacks.
Yeah, against Michigan State, he made a really big 4th down stop. And, against Indiana, I mean, he had the big sack on Curtis Work that was kind of one of those turning points in the game early on after Indiana took a 7-0 lead. So, yeah, he's a great player, and they've got, again, loaded defense. And against this Michigan offense that has the second worst passing attack in the Power 4, it's going to be hard for Michigan to go against this quality of defense and quality of scheme with Jim Knowles.
Number 1 scoring defense, number 1 total defense, and Michigan is the only team in America without a 40-yard pass play this season, which is just, you can't, I mean, the sweet spot for drives, right, is about that 7-play, 75-yard drive. I'd say that is the sweet spot, right? That means you're not really seeing third downs. You're getting 5, 6, 12, 14. Of course, everyone's like, oh, you want one play, 75. It's like, I mean, of course, but only if it's going to result in 75, right? If you only have big chunk plays and you can't, or only deep shots, then you can't only rely on two play drives. And if you're only getting 3-4 yards of play, you're not going to put together 13, 14 play drives consistently against really good defenses. One of the things Sharon talked about this Monday, they said, and Davis and Quentin Johnson, the longest tenured player, the only guy who's seen the losses and the wins, right? Sharon has as well. They say, I mean, they know their path to victory, and they know it. And it starts on the ground, kind of starts and stops on the ground. And they do have a little bit of momentum now after their most promising game in some time against Northwestern. They had 201 yards rushing, average like 5.7, had 5 touchdowns from their seniors. But Northwestern is one thing, and Ohio State is a whole nother. These are the rushing totals from the last 3 games for Michigan and why they won. So in 2021, they won the rushing battle by 233 yards. In 2022, they won it by 109 yards. And last year, they won it by 49 yards. Okay, so the first year, in 21, 297 yards and 6 touchdowns. The next year, 252 and 3 touchdowns. And if you recall, as you do, 2 of those were 70-plus yard home runs from Donovan Edwards in the fourth, right? So they were pretty bottled up those first 3 quarters, Michigan was. And then last year, 39 carries for 156 yards. That's 4 yards a carry and 2 touchdowns. The longest run of the day was 22 yards. And so I bring this up to say, if the path to victory is on the ground and Michigan, I don't want to say they cannot pass it because we have gone into this game. I remember 2 years ago, I wrote that Michigan's passing game is what it is. They're not going to be able to pass. And then J.J. McCarthy throws for 300 yards and they have 5 plays of 40 plus against Ohio State, right? I mean, that's just the way it goes. So you don't want to say it's done. That said, this passing offense hasn't even shown to be as capable as that passing offense. And that was a lackluster attack, right? And this is just the bottom of the barrel in America. So,
well, the question is also, Colston Loveland going to be good to go? Presumably, he will be, based on it sounded like how Sharon Moore kind of termed it. It sounded like he was making progress off the injury. But if he can't go, I mean, it's going to be really, really, really tough for them to do anything. Because again, those outside receivers. Granted, Tyler Morris had his best game by far out of the season with 7 catches at 64 yards against Northwestern. But with Caleb Downs, though, again, what he even could do against a player like Colston Loveland, I mean, he's athletic enough to do a lot of damage, there and limit him. And then, again, you're not relying on Tyler Morris to be able to kind of move the offense. And so that's the problem with Michigan. It's like, you better hope that, Colston Loveland's at full health, in optimal condition for this game because they're going to need him.
And on the other side of the ball, right, Will Johnson. There was a report last week by ESPN that he was not going to play. Good job by a reporter asking Sharon about that directly on Monday. He said he can't confirm that or deny that. He said, all I can do is go by what the doctors tell me. It did sound like they were leaving the door open for him. Now, these last few weeks, I was not expecting Will to play. It was a moot point. This was always, and I don't expect him to play a bowl game, right? This will be the one. He's nursing a turf toe. These are one of those flare-up injuries, but you're not going to aggravate it that much worse, I don't think. This is me speaking opinion. No, okay, not reporting anything, right? I'm just talking this out, right? Here's the thought process, and just tell me if this checks out. Yeah, let's say you got the turf toe, right? And we know how these nagging things can go. If you're not about to go again for 4 months at least after this day until the combine, don't you think that's enough time to get right? And I mean, he's not going to play in the Mayo Bowl, the Chick-fil-A. I mean, Music City Bowl, wherever they go. Will Johnson's not playing, and it would be pretty tough to go out. I mean, Will Johnson will still be an all-timer, one of the short list of the best defensive backs in the history of Michigan football. Certainly in my lifetime, I would say Charles Woodson, Marlon Jackson, and then I'd probably go Will Johnson. Maybe, like a Leon Hall might be on that list. It's a short list. It's a really short list of people who've been as good as him. Mikey Sainer still not as long. You get the point. But that'd be a tough way to go out. If to miss your final 5 games, miss 6 games total, and then 6 and really 3 quarters because he missed the final 3 quarters of the Illinois game. If he doesn't play again after October 17th, you only spend 3 years in Ann Arbor, and the final year is 6-6. I mean, you're still a legend, right? I mean, he's an All-American, he's a national champion, he's a Rose Bowl winner, but just not the way you thought he'd go out.
No, I mean, you wouldn't hope that, but I mean, again, if it's an injury, and again, he's got other considerations at play here. I mean, with the NFL draft, and so that is true. I mean, and going against this receiving core after sitting out for 4 or 5 games. I mean, that's tough, especially if you're limited. And so I don't know. I mean, it's a cost benefit analysis that he has to do. I mean, in consideration of again wanting to play for his team as well as his own personal interests involved. So it's a lot to kind of manage and contemplate for him. I'm sure he's trying to get back healthy, but yeah, it's not a great situation for Michigan. It's not a great situation for Will Johnson. It's kind of unfortunate deal, and it's been kind of hanging over Michigan's defense the whole month of November. So, and Michigan's defense has really done pretty well. And
I was going to say, can we talk about them?
yeah, they're doing well. Right now. I mean, again, you consider the last opponent, Northwestern has one of the worst offenses in the country. I think you can make that argument, but Indiana did, and they shut them down in the second half. So in the final 6 quarters, they haven't allowed a touchdown, which is pretty impressive for a defense that was really quite pliable early on in the season against elite competition, especially at Texas and later Oregon. And that's the question. I mean, is this defense able to hold up against an elite offense? We haven't necessarily seen that. I mean, Indiana looks like it was an efficient offense by all statistical measure, but they, again, didn't play very, very tough opponents until they faced somebody like Michigan, which was a more above average defense. And Michigan was able to suppress them in that second half. So the question is whether this defense can really do the job against an elite offense like Ohio State. And also it's going to come down to, again, tackling in space and doing some of these things that they haven't been able to do against these better teams.
Well, Michigan has to lean on its defense, right? Yes, they just scored 50 points against Northwestern. Their previous high all season, 30 in the opener against Fresno State, right? They're not going to win a shootout. You're not going to go down to Columbus and do what you did 2 years ago and put up 45 points. I feel very comfortable saying that. So what you are going to have to do is exactly what you said. You're going to have to lean on your defense, specifically your front, specifically that defensive line, the trenches. I mean, they've been the best unit all year. Josiah Stewart, Mason Graham, Kenneth Grant, Derek Moore, TJ Guy, Rayshawn Benny, Cam Brandt, even a little bit's come on, and Trey Pierce. All of them. Ike Iwunnah, if you're there, you got to produce. If you're on the field, you got to step up. That's just where they have to make their money because, think about what they're asking people to do on the outside. Jair Hill was just benched. If they're, we don't know what's going on with Will Johnson, but it could be Amir Hall and at one cornerback, and then goodness, I forget who was playing cornerback the other game. Then you got all sorts of people rotating, right? You got Makari Page instead of playing safety, you got him down at nickel.
And Zeke Berry. Yeah.
Then you got Wesley Walker and you got Zeke Berry, right? That's who it was. Zeke Berry out on the other corner. So you're mixing and matching, and when you're doing that against. It's one thing to do that against Northwestern, you're fine, but you can't do that against Ohio State or you're pretty cooked. So Will Johnson's health a big factor, but also just Michigan has to get home with 4. They have to be able to find a way to get home with 4, or when they're sending those buzzword simulated pressures, it has to get home like a Jayshawn Barham, right? He has been better actually this last month, in place more, but not. I still haven't taken. It was that one game. It was the Indiana game where Brandon Hillman just decapitated a couple Hoosiers in a row. Right? We were told that's what we were going to be seeing from Jayshawn Barham like every quarter. Right? We haven't even seen we've seen flashes, like mini flashes, but he is improving. But how about someone like him? Step up. It's got to be people on this defense. And then my last note. Before we take a break and then we make some picks and we get your final thoughts. Dominic Zavada. For my money, I have not kept tabs on every kicker in America. If there's a better one, I don't know who it is. This dude is automatic, just a straight weapon. 15 of 16. I think the only one that was missed was like tipped, blocked. Like it got messed up in October. If he kicks it and he drills it, 5 or 6 now. Field goals from 50 plus yards, another from 56. He's perfect from 50 out or further. And again, everybody in Metro Detroit is raving about Jake Bates, as they should for the Lions, who's also, I think, a perfect 15 for 15. Well, A, he's a professional. B, almost all of those kicks have been indoors. Zavada is doing, that 56-yarder he just kicked in like 39 degrees and like 12 miles an hour wind in Northwestern. Have you felt a football in that weather? Like, it hurts. It's like kicking a brick, and just no problem. So you don't win games with field goals in Columbus a lot, but it can help keep you alive, right? When you flip a field late in the half, when you steal some points. And so maybe there's something there too. That's one edge I would give to Michigan.
Yeah, I mean that's probably is the one area where Michigan probably has a distinct edge. And I do think the psychology plays in their favor too, just going into this game, because again, they really don't have much to lose and everything to gain, and plus they know that they beat in Ohio State, and Ohio State's going to feel very tense, I think, early on, especially if things don't go well, and their fan base is going to be very tense as well, and that's probably going to come through based on how the crowd's reaction is, especially if Michigan does something positive at the beginning and Ohio State does a few things negative there. So it could get interesting if all that stuff happens. But, again, Michigan's going to have to play with the idea that, they need to get on top early and not rely on Dominic Zabata. They're going to have to actually get into the end zone somehow, some way. And they better hope that, Colston Loveland is good to go, because he's going to be a key part of that.
Elsewhere, other injuries, Miles Hinton, I think sounds like he'll be good to go. He returned to the game. He left last week. Ben Hall, no update yet on Ben Hall, who did leave the game and didn't return on Saturday against Northwestern. All right, we're going to take a break. On the other side, we have 5 games to pick in this final regular season week of college football. Don't go anywhere. This is Hail Yes. All right, we are back. Time for the picks. And normally this is where I bring in Andrew Burkle, but as we mentioned before, Andrew's not with us. Reiner and I flying solo. Actually, thanks to Robin Chan, who we will thank again at the end of the show, our audio engineer. He helped us get this off the ground. Reiner and I might have been fooling around for some time if it was just left up to us. But we made it. We're here. And it is time for the picks. So I'm just going to run us through these as well, and we'll go back and forth a little bit, Reiner. And so I will do this how I've always told Andrew he should do it. You got to start off. You got to recap the week before, set the scene, tell people everybody's record. And it's funny. Andrew had been fighting it this year. He went 4-0 last week. The only week he's not here to gloat about it or to soak it in. A 4-0 week for Andrew got him back up to 500. He's 24-24. Reiner, not as great of a week for our friend, 1-3. Been a little bit of the story of the season, although a 4-0 week for you here, and you're just like Andrew, you're back to 500 because Reiner is 22-26.
Yeah, that's probably not in the cards.
Actually, we got 5 games this week, so 5-0, and you're ahead.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen though. I mean, this seems like a lost cause at this point. So I do not have a good feel on this college football season so far. And I think last week was evidence of just how weird it's been, with a lot of road conquests in the SEC or teams that went down on the road that probably shouldn't have gone down on the road. And now the college football playoff is completely wide open, and you've got a bunch of teams that you would not have expected to see probably in there. We'll see what the rankings reveal later today.
Almost like we could go back to 4, right?
Yeah. So,
no, I'm kidding. I do. Well, I am excited to see this 12-team playoff. But for what it's worth, if anybody's curious, I was 3-1 last week. Nice little 29-19 now on the year. So let's try to keep that rolling. Okay, starting off, we're gonna put Michigan, Ohio State last. So if you want, you can skip ahead. But if you want to get some winners, stick around. So up first, we can rapid fire this, Reiner. Texas versus Texas A&M, the Longhorns laying 5.5, going to College Station, where Texas A&M is trying to rebound off of their own heartbreaking loss against, was that Auburn? I believe it was. So Reiner, they've been waiting on this rivalry to be renewed for some time.
I've actually covered one of these games. It is pretty awesome in Kyle Field. So Kyle Field is an incredible environment. It's gotten probably even better because they've expanded the stadium since then. I was there, I think, in 2009, Colt McCoy game. I think Texas won that year. That was the year that they went to the title game and played Alabama and lost, and so began the Saban dynasty.
Reiner watches a national championship team every single year. Every year. right? Like this year, you will have seen Oregon twice. You'll see Ohio State twice. You've seen all the Bamas, all the Georgias, the Michigans. Now it's Texas A&M. I mean, there's no end with you.
Well, yeah, I've seen a lot of teams over the years, but yeah, that game was pretty cool. But yeah, A&M is coming off a really tough road loss at Auburn. Peyton Thorne went off in that game, which nobody expected. Peyton Thorne, obviously a former MSU fame. So I think, A&M was probably looking ahead to this game. In fact, Mike Elko kind of had a slip before the Auburn loss in which he kind of referenced the fact that all his focus was on actually Texas when he meant to say Auburn. So I think they really are focused on beating Texas. And so I think Texas is going to be in for a fight. I don't know if A&M pulls it out, but I think A&M covers.
Yeah, I mean, you just know, rivalry games, teams that are tightly competitive, right? Like both top 15 teams, both teams that have, wins against top 5 teams in America, teams that this year on their best day can snatch anybody. Yeah, 5.5 is that's the weirdest number in sports gambling. It's always funny business. And I don't like laying it. Whenever I got to do it, the team wins by 4. I have been floored on a 5.5, and I haven't bet a team minus 5.5 in years almost. It feels like because of it. I get off that number when I can, and so A&M, right? You can be down 11 late and a late backdoor cover. You can go to overtime and you can kick a field goal. Then they score the touchdown. There's so many ways. You just keep it tight. So I will take the points. But what concerns me is Andrew is also taking the Aggies. So all 3 of us on A&M. Up next, Clemson, minus 2.5 at South Carolina. I'll go first, just so it's not always the same game flow or speaking flow. I got South Carolina in this one, and it is not just because I have an ex who went to Clemson. It is because Clemson has just not been the same, right? This year, Cade Klubnik has got their offense looking closer to what it had been sort of in their heyday. Clemson now is not Clemson of the Deshaun Watson run, of the 18-22 Clemson, where people thought that they might be taking over Alabama's mantle, right? Instead of Georgia. This is a decent team, right? They got clobbered by Georgia early. And Beamer's got the Gamecocks, playing good ball, right? The Cockaboose, as everybody knows, is now famed down in Columbia. And so why not, right? 2.5. It also kind of feels like, Clemson, you're more used to them being better. They don't even need to win by a field goal, just 2.5. Let me take it. No. It's trappy. I think South Carolina wins this game outright. Gamecocks.
Yeah, I can see your point. And Williams-Brice is a tough place to play for any opponent. Those South Carolina fans do not like Clemson. But Clemson, I think, is a resilient team. I like what Dabo's done after the Georgia game. They've suffered one loss to Louisville since then, and they've got a lot at stake here. They could get into the college football playoff if they win this game. So I think they're going to really empty the arsenal in this game. It's a rivalry game too. And then Dabo he's a pretty big game coach, has shown it in the past. And so I think he can rally the troops and, make it so that Clemson actually goes on the road and beats South Carolina.
All right. So Ryan's going with Clemson. Andrew is riding with me, and he has South Carolina as well, which brings us to the Iron Bowl. Auburn receiving, getting 11.5, going to Tuscaloosa to take on the Tide. Right? The stage is set. Let's hear it. Let's hear it, Mr. Tuscaloosa.
Well, the fact that this game is not in Auburn now, if it was in Jordan-Hare, I think Auburn has a really good shot at winning the game. Weird things happen in Jordan-Hare, and including what happened last year with Alabama and Jalen Milroe with that 4th and 31 pass to Isaiah Bond in the back of the end zone that basically allowed them to get into the college football playoff last year. And so, but this year is different. I think that Alabama's going to have a tough time actually coming off that loss to Oklahoma, where Jalen Milroe did play terribly in that and just made one bad decision after another. Alabama's really been hard to figure out. all season long. I mean, they looks like they solved things after the Vanderbilt loss and the Tennessee loss, I should say. But then, they went on the road and beat LSU by a substantial margin, but then again, lose 24-3 to Oklahoma. So I don't know where to pick them. Or where they stand right now. So I'm going to go with Auburn here to cover because frankly, they just look like they are putting some things together with Hugh Freeze. They haven't been impressive either, but 11.5 is a lot.
I don't want to sound hypocritical when I say 11.5 is a lot later. I don't want to give away anything. If 11.5 is a lot here. However, it's because that top team has not only has the bottom team shown recently to come up and pop off a good team at A&M last week, Auburn did, but Alabama has come down, right? I mean, they are both trending in the opposite direction and nearly a couple touchdowns. And I'm sure you probably saw when Nick Saban said that Jordan Hare is haunted. And I know that's not where they are, but I just thought that was really funny. There's always something in the air for that game. There often is. And I mean, Alabama's just not good enough to just consistently beat a rival that is a decent team by 2 touchdowns. I just don't think they're good enough to do that. So I'm going to go with Auburn, and lo and behold, this is bad news, Bears. Andrew has Auburn as well. Yeah, I have a feeling I know now which way that's going to go. Okay, now we move to the Big Ten. We are almost to the best game, but first we got to stop in Reiner's other stomping grounds in East Lansing, where the Michigan State Spartans are 1-point favorites over the Rutgers Scarlet Knights on Senior Day, looking for a bowl berth. Michigan State 5-6. Reiner, do I hear 6-6?
I think that you do, because what you've seen with Michigan State is just, I mean, they might not be able to execute all the time consistently, but they seem to be, again, they're in it mentally, and they seem to be rallied together. I mean, Cal Holiday said that today, that the players are really still playing for each other, and there is that kind of camaraderie and esprit de corps that they have. So I think that that's a very good sign for them. The other good sign is the fact that they're pretty good run defense, and that's Rutgers' best thing is rushing offense. And, Rutgers' quarterback is also Minnesota's former quarterback, and that quarterback was playing for the same team as Joe Rossi, the Michigan State defensive coordinator. So Rossi knows Kalmanakis, I think that's how you pronounce it, pretty well. So I think that bodes well for them too. But the fact that the strengths of MSU match up pretty well with the Rutgers strengths, and the fact that Michigan State has to win this game to get a bowl game, which would be huge for them, and especially Jonathan Smith, he needs to get some momentum going for that program. I'm going to go with Michigan State here, especially the fact that it's a 2, and it's a gotta-have-it way.
Well capped. I believe it's Ethan Kaliakmanis is the quarterback. But yeah, I mean, we saw him. I saw him on a cold night in Minnesota, Minneapolis last year, and it was dreadful. Will Johnson pick 6, like 2 minutes in, and Michigan just never looked back. It was 52-10. I mean, just one of their absolute barn burner or steamrollings. Yeah, no, Rutgers 2-5 in their last 7. The weird team started the year 4-0, lost 4 to go to 4-4, won 2 to get to 6-4. Looked like they were about to pick up a big win last week against Illinois, up by 1, 4th and 11, and Illinois is about to attempt a field goal with 20 seconds left, like from 55 yards to win the game. Schiano calls a timeout to ice the kicker. They kick the field goal after the timeout. See, it's not going to come anywhere near reaching, and they're like, all right, we're just going to go for it. Instead, they bring the offense back on the field, and it's like a 45-yard touchdown, and Illinois wins it. I mean, wild game. And so I feel like that's got to be pretty demoralizing, right? If you're Rutgers, you're 6-5, you've already won a bowl game. I mean, this is not for a trophy. There's not going to be a ton of students in East Lansing, I don't expect. So maybe there's that. However, it's going to be kind of sleepy. It's not like one of those rally, like, us against the world spots if you're Rutgers. It's just kind of a cold Saturday in East Lansing, and not a ton of juice. I'm not sure what they have to play for. I might pick it the other way, right? If MSU was 6-5 and Rutgers were 5-6, and it was in Piscataway, I'd probably see it the same way. So I think MSU can do it. However, Andrew does not see it the same. I was going to try to give my best Andrew impression and explain why Rutgers, but I mean, I don't think it's that hard to see, right? I mean, Michigan State is horribly inconsistent. They don't put up a ton of points. They turn the ball over all the time. And if it wasn't for a fourth down miracle for Illinois, Rutgers has won 3 in a row, is 7-4 and looking for an 8th win, right? And Schiano, I mean, they always got a good defense. So I can see it. I mean, it's 1 point spread for a reason. So good job, Andrew. Well said. Sure. Well said, Andrew. We'll start with Andrew, who has Michigan to cover 20.5 points this weekend in Columbus. Reiner, it is Michigan. It is Ohio State. It is the game. It is noon. It is in the Horseshoe on Saturday, November 30th. Yes, Michigan is picked to lose by 3 touchdowns, 20.5 points, as we just said. Do they cover? Do they win?
Michigan covers. I don't think they win, but I don't think it's going to be as wide of a spread or wide of a margin for victory for Ohio State as the odds makers think. So I think Michigan again plays them tough. I think the defense has seen some improvement there. I'm not totally sold on Will Howard being able to consistently put points up in the way that, again, we're used to seeing Ohio State do it in the past, especially in Urban Meyer's best years and the first years of Ryan Day too. So, but I mean, again, this is a really not a favorable matchup for Michigan, just based on the fact that their passing game is so limited, and the defense has been susceptible against good skill players in space. So I do think Ohio State wins this game. Again, they just have better talent across the board, perform better all season than Michigan has. So Ohio State wins the game, but Michigan's got some fight in them. So I think they keep it closer than the spread.
Michigan has not been this large of an underdog in Vegas ever. Full stop. Any game since there is record of it consistently in 1969. That was also when they were a 17-point underdog that day against Ohio State. They won. They beat the Buckeyes. And little fun fact, my girlfriend's grandfather was actually the defensive backs coach for Bo Schembechler on that team. So shout out to Richard Hunter, Mr. Hunter, Grandpa Hunter, Papa, we call him. Anyways, I don't see that happening this year. I don't see that happening this time. It has been 5 years since Ohio State has beaten Michigan. You put some good notes in our little pre-show sheet here, Reiner. I'm going to read them now about what Ryan Day said, losing 3 straight years. We know what's at stake. We felt what it's like to not win this game, and it's bad. It's one of the worst things that's happened to me in my life, quite honestly. Other than losing my father and a few other things, it's quite honestly for my family the worst thing that's happened. So we can never have that happen again, and that's been the approach all season. Now, he's not the first to say this. We all know how painful it is to lose this game, to win this game, and how joyful it is to win this game. That said, Ohio State's not taking their foot off the gas. Doesn't matter if they're up by 70 in the fourth. Doesn't matter if they're up by 3 in the fourth. Well, if they're up by 3 in the fourth, they might take their foot off the gas just because they're choke artists. And if they're up 3 in the fourth, then Michigan probably wins this game, right? I think if Michigan keeps it tight, I think Michigan can win it because Michigan wins those types of games. I don't see Michigan keeping this tight. They cannot pass the ball. Yes, they started running it. This Ohio State defense is so much better than Northwestern. I mean, Michigan did exactly what it wants to do against Northwestern. I mean, look at their first downs. 4 yards, 3 yards, 6 yards, 7 yards. They were always in short, second and manageable, always in third and short. Of their 11 third down conversions, 10 were 3rd and 5 or shorter. They were always in positive situations. That's just not going to be the case against Ohio State. You're not always going to be in good situations. And you talked about it. If there's no Colston Loveland, I don't know who you're going to be able to throw this ball to. I mean, Marlon Klein a little bit. Tyler Morris, it was his best game, and that was extremely limited. 7 catches, 64 yards. I mean, that's a forgettable game for a true number one wide receiver. It just is. Samaj Morgan was not healthy. I mean, you see if you look at who they're recruiting at wide receiver, right? I think they're about to flip Derek Meadows from LSU. He's 6'5". He's 210. That's the profile they're going to start going towards. They don't have that right now. Ohio State's defense is so much better than Michigan's offense. And Michigan's defense is pretty on par with Ohio State's offense. But it's the flip side that is just such a nightmare. And you saw what Ohio State just did to Indiana, punching in a touchdown late. Oh, they will not be afraid to run this thing up. It was a lot of years ago where Ryan Day said that he wants to hang half 100 on Michigan. And if this is his chance to do it, I don't know that it will be. He's going to. This will be all gas, no brakes. They will show no mercy if they can. And with that, I'm not as worried about a backdoor cover. I mean, they're not taking, like, they're not putting in second stringers, right? Guys came back for a reason. They came back with the gold pants, and they came back to hammer a Michigan team. And you can already kind of see it in the tenor on social media. A lot of Michigan fans very upset about the tone with which guys like Jack Sawyer are talking on Ohio State. It's like, oh, so now you're saying how you wish the game was today because you're favored by so much. The last few years, maybe they didn't have that energy. Well, that's not their problem. They're only playing this game right here, right now, and they are pissed off. I don't know if I went on long enough about that, but it's just there's just so many reasons why it feels. And if Michigan had not just put up 50, I wonder if people are thinking like, oh boy, right? Like you're really walking into one. So I think you said it great early on this first quarter, these first drive each way. I need to see what those first 15 plays look like. And then I feel like you'll really have a much better sense of, wow, like, oh, Tony's an idiot. I mean, not the first time we've said that. Like they really got a shot here. Or it's like, oh boy, they've been waiting on this one, and they just walked into a 3-hour bloodbath. I think it's one or the other. Is that too lame to say they're going to win or lose? You see why I like the two sides of that, right?
I guess, but I mean, there's probably some happy in between, medium. I mean, again, Michigan has played teams of Ohio State's caliber, and they haven't been absolutely blown out of the water. I mean, they 31-12 against Texas was the final result.
They were blown out of the water.
Yeah, no, they were blown out. But Texas again, took it again. They did take the foot off the gas.
Ohio State will not show mercy like that. Ohio State would have won that
again. They to assure victory, they're going to probably want to keep it. In a situation where they're in control, and the best way to control that is just to bleed out the clock. And so that's why you do that. And that's what Steve Sarkisian did. And then same with, Oregon. Oregon was, took the air out of the ball in the second half. It's risky. I mean, Will Howard is not, again, CJ Stroud. You start throwing the ball, again, you're setting yourself up to get picked off or, turn it over. The best thing you can do when you're up by a big margin is to run the ball, and that gives Michigan a chance to keep it close. But, I mean, they could possibly keep it close anyway, depending on what happens early on. I mean, again, you see that doubt in Ohio State's mind, and then, again, it starts to build on you psychologically. You start pressing and things like that start to happen, and that's how you get to a situation where one team who doesn't look like they're able to compete with that team of that caliber ends up hanging around and maybe even has a chance of that upset. So, yeah, it'll be interesting. Your theory makes sense. I understand why you feel that way. Certainly Ohio State has a lot of pent-up aggression based off the last 3 games. The fact that, again, Ryan Day, even going back to 2020, said not half 100. He said he was going to hang 100. So, there's a lot of anger in Columbus, and they should be more than motivated to play Michigan. But again, it's not like Michigan isn't motivated to play Ohio State either. So, and it's not like Michigan lacks talent at certain positions, and so they could create some problem for Ohio State in certain areas.
And I don't want to count them short. I mean, and they're peaking, and you touched on it earlier. There's something to be said for when you got nothing to lose, right? And you're playing free. I mean, all the pressure's on Ohio State this year, right? And so no. And so no, Michigan has a path towards victory. I just wonder if it starts to snowball the other way. But man, you just haven't seen it snowball the other way lately, have you? You know, Michigan stays resilient and Ohio State doesn't put its foot down. Maybe I just walked into one, but it's just because they want to run it up, right? Because they don't just want to win. They want to win big. That's why. That's where
they want to leave no doubt, but I wonder if leave no doubt means like, okay, let's not be stupid here and let's just, smash them. And he does want to prove a point, though, Ryan Day, also, I think, about the physicality and toughness there. So expect them to want to win the rushing battle, too.
And Michigan, you referenced the Texas game. Michigan is a much better team right now than it was when it played Texas. So for what that's worth. However, they were down 25 with 2 minutes left in that game, and they did lose by 21 to Oregon. So that's kind of right around where this is at. But we'll all be watching, and Michigan was picked to lose last time they were down there. They were a touchdown underdog, and they came away with the win. They've won it 3 straight years, and it's been going on almost 2,000 days since they've lost this game. It was over 1,800. So do not count them out. Do not count Sharon Moore's group out. Big one coming up. All right. Thanks, everybody, for listening and tagging along with us. I'm not thanking Andrew this time. He doesn't get thanked for being warm in Florida and on vacation. No. So no thank you, Andrew. But thank you to Reiner, who always shows up, always comes through. All right, I'll thank Andrew. He's a good guy. And then thanks also to our editor-in-chief, Nicole Avery-Nichols, our executive editor, Jim Schaefer, our sports editor, Bill Bradley, and our audio engineer, Robin Chan. There we go. I normally have more names in front of me. For them, for Reiner, I'm Tony. We hope all of you have a happy Thanksgiving, safe beginning to your holiday season, and enjoy the game on Saturday. Quickly, if you're listening to this on Wednesday, Michigan hoops against Xavier, 8:30 p.m. Wednesday evening. Fort Myers tip-off championship. Michigan just beat Virginia Tech by 12 on Monday night. Roddy Gale scored 20. Will Cheddar scored 10 in that one. We'll get to more hoops later, but this was Michigan-Ohio State week. We had to talk football. All right, thanks for listening. Be safe. This is Say Oh Yes.